Cool. So before we start, let's just get a quick show of hands. Who here has used Xcode Cloud? Nice. We've got a nice turnout now. So of those people, who's used it for personal projects? Indie devs and that kind of stuff. Cool. What about professional projects and enterprisey? Oh, nice. Okay. Cool. To be honest, I'm a bit more surprised than the professional one because I personally see there's a lot of limitations, but it's good that it's being used a lot. All right, cool. So before the main introduction, let's just talk a little bit about CI/CD in general. In general, with CI/CD, you have this continuous flow where you would write your code, test it, deploy it, and then send it out to production. You would monitor for any issues, and then you kind of go back to the beginning and reiterate the whole flow basically. Throughout that whole process, you use a whole bunch of tools, right? Typically, you would have for each stage you would have different tools. I figured it's an umbrella. Fall slowly. Anyway, there's a whole heap of tools. You probably use them in different stages, different projects. I've used a whole heap of them. Look, it's a complex web, right? I got some bad news. Xcode Cloud is in itself another tool. But there's some good news in that Xcode Cloud is a tool that can replace all your other tools or partially replace your other tools. So it's not necessarily you're adding a new tool, you're potentially taking away, right? Which is good. Which is okay. Go get your phone. Which is great, right? But there is, there's a whole heap of limitations. It is not as mature as other build platforms, right? So then, what exactly is Xcode Cloud, right? It builds your code. It can, run any sort of Xcode build command. So it does builds, it does static code analysis, which is basically the analyze in Xcode. You can run tests. Integrates with your CI/CD flow, so you can fail or PR if your tests fail, for example. It does the last step, which is the distribution through Testflight. It has a very generous free tier of 25 compute hours. I suppose the keyword there is compute hours, however Apple calculates that. And then I think goes up like 50 hours, 100 hours, which you can pay for essentially. But hopefully you agree with me. But by the end of it, it's fantastic for indie devs. It does. I would feel it does pretty much everything you would potentially need. So let's dig into the workflow. The workflow is basically what makes Xcode Cloud pipeline, we want to call it, work. So it's made up of 3 potential steps. So you got the start condition, you got whatever actions you want to run, followed by any actions that you want to do at the very end. So let's dig a little bit deeper. All of this runs within a build environment, just like anything else. You can pick an Xcode version, you can pick a Mac OS version, and then you can also configure stuff like caching of the derived data folder. One thing which I found interesting, some people suggest that if you want to cache other bits of information between your builds, you can just write it to the derived data folder, and knowing that Xcode Cloud will back that up, and then it will get restored later on. Seems like a massive hack, but if some people say it works, so maybe it works. But then again, it's not officially coming from Apple, so it might stop working one day. And also, as part of the environment, you can set up the variables and secrets just like anything else. They'll get masked out in your build logs and that kind of stuff. Start conditions, Pretty much the same as any other CI/CD. You can do it on branch change, pull request, tag change, schedule, or even manually start it. I can't think of any other way you'd want to schedule it or start condition or whatever. So yeah, not much more to say about that. Code integration, Git integration wise, it supports Bitbucket, Bitbucket Server, GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, and GitLab. It worth mentioning, it doesn't support Azure DevOps if you use that. It doesn't support Mercurial, doesn't support SVN. Big whoop. I don't know what you want to think of that, but yeah. I'm sure most people use one of these three, so it's a 5 or 3, however you want to count it. So yeah. It also supports multiple repositories. You can, for example, you might use another repository for a Git submodule. You might want to store some custom scripts externally, and you might want to, do a Git pull as part of one of your steps. Your dependency managers may actually use it. Yeah, and the way you set it up is you essentially have to go to App Store Connect, authorize the access and everything. It's much easier than most other CI/CDs I noticed. It's quite just works. It's the typical Apple way of doing it, of it just working almost. Actions. So the actions that you perform as part of your build are the same as what Xcode can do. So you can do an Xcode build, you can do a test, you can do archive, analyze, or archive. Within these, you can configure the build to be a release or public, however you want to do it. Right? It's really up to you. It uses your Xcode build schemes configuration essentially. One thing which is interesting is it forces you to run these all in parallel as opposed to other CI/CDs, which you can or you probably have configured them to be linear. Like the typical CI/CDs, you might have a flow like this where you clone, you run a bunch of tools, you run your unit tests, you're happy, you upload the code coverage somewhere, and then you archive and you distribute using Testflight. You might, that's a very linear sort of flow, right? Xcode Cloud doesn't really encourage this. They encourage you to, this linear, right? Again, they actually encourage a bit differently. So they parallelize, if that's the right word, I don't know, that half of it. And then after everything on the left is done, then it runs the post actions, which also means they run on a separate machine because these run in their own environment. As a side note, I got curious after the talks yesterday to know, are they using AWS or something for their build machines? So I did a reverse IP lookup and stuff. From what I can tell, they don't seem to be using AWS. The IP addresses are all located in Cupertino, apparently. So maybe they're hosting it themselves. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. Cool. So, as part of your build, sometimes you do need to run the custom build scripts. You need to upload your code coverage. You need to run SonarQube or something like that, right? So you do have a bunch of custom build scripts which you can run at various stages. So you can have the post clone, the pre-build, or the post build. There's probably different situations where you want to use each of them. Post one, you may want to use that for configuring the environment. I'll get to that one in a bit. The pre-build, you may want to configure your build tools like other RSwift, if you guys use that plugin. It actually needs some build permissions to run, so you have to basically write to a plist file. There's a command you got to run, so that you need to do that at the pre-build step. And like I said, post-build you may want to do the simple uploads or code coverage or something, Yeah, cool. So dependencies, right? It's easy if you're using Swift Package Manager. It all just works out of the box. But the temporary build environment, it doesn't actually have Carthage or CocoaPods installed. So if you do use any of those, you have to use Homebrew, which is pre-installed, to install them every time. So you're going to potentially chew up your build minutes, but that's really up to you how you manage it. Yeah, and like I said, you can put inside the post clone, and that's kind of how it would work. Certificates and signing. This is pretty much the biggest godsend. It's automatic. Like you have to do nothing. It manages it for you. Because it actually doesn't work for enterprise right now. Maybe that's coming soon, but right now it's all the latest Xcode and App Store distributions. Moving on to the build steps. Like I said earlier, it runs literally the commands that you have within Xcode configured against your schema, so your run scheme and stuff. So build, test. You can specify which test suite to run, that kind of stuff. We'll get to that in a bit as well. Oh, and of course, analyze. Analyze-wise, remember that's only Objective-C. So obviously you can build Objective-C, no point analyzing Swift code. You won't get anything out of it. And then at the end, there's a bunch of different options you have. You can notify via Slack or email. You can go to App Store Connect, set up the Slack webhook, just like anything else. Testflight, you can do internal or external Testflight. Internal and external was added a few years ago. I'm not exactly sure. I've always used external. My understanding is with internals, you can't use that build to go for an external build. So you don't accidentally release it, that sort of thing. So maybe you only want to do it for like a UAT build or something. And obviously if you have a Mac OS app, you can notarize it so that you can distribute like that. Cool. So one of the nice things which it does, but it kind of falls short compared to something like Fastlane, is you can actually add some testing notes which are automatically set within Testflight. So for example, they provide an example, Apple provides an example where it gets the latest commit message, writes it to this particular file here, what to test. And then your commit message becomes what to test as part of the build. So that's a nice little thing if your developers are disciplined enough to have proper commit messages. And then obviously you can have like just a static file, maybe you just want to always have the same commit message. Yeah, but like I said, like it doesn't do everything like Fastlane. With Fastlane, you can actually configure the entire App Store metadata, right? You can upload your images, you can upload all that. It doesn't do that for us. You could, I suppose, maybe no, you can't do it as part of a post build because remember you need the build to get uploaded, and then you need to hit the App Store Connect APIs, but then App Store Connect APIs may not. There's no way to trigger them because the build hasn't uploaded. It's like a chicken and the egg sort of problem. That's why you can't actually use Fastlane to do that unless you trigger it yourself from something else like GitHub Actions or something. Yeah, so that also comes back to, you can actually integrate with Xcode Cloud from your own systems as well. So using the App Store Connect APIs. For example, you may want to download the build artifact that you generated as part of your build and then upload it to something else or use it for something else. So like the place that I work at, Bilu, we've used it for you download it and then you upload it to AWS and do some testing up in the cloud on the device farm. So it's something that you can kind of work into your workflow, that sort of thing. I've got some sample code which I'll also show running a bit later. I give no guarantees on the sample code. It's pretty basic. Luckily, but no dependencies. It's all shell scripts and stuff, so it's really easy to run. Some oddities, which kind of don't belong on any particular slide. It automatically increments the build number. I don't know why some CI/CDs don't do that for you. You have to add an extra step, that kind of stuff. Like Fastlane, you got to add an extra step. Like I said, you can connect to your Slack channel. You can connect additional repositories, Testflight groups. It doesn't manage your Testflight groups. You have to do that yourself. But it kind of makes sense, right? It's not really for Testflight groups is not necessarily something that developers need to manage. It's more for other people in the team. permissions for whatever you're doing within it comes from App Store Connect. So your different roles that they have in App Store Connect. One thing which I don't like is there's no config YAML file that you can copy between projects. It's all done through UI, which is kind of a little bit annoying because then you need to know what you changed, and you can't modify multiple workflows at once just by copy replace, that sort of thing. And Git LFS is installed, so you can use it for really large projects. Don't have any issues with that. So another thing is it actually supports Swift packages and Swift playgrounds. The way you need to do it is you need to actually add your Swift package or Swift playground inside a Xcode project or workflow. I'm not sure, and then Xcode project or workspace, and then you have to upload it through that. I'm not exactly sure how it all works because obviously you don't upload to iTunes Connect with that, so or you may or may not, depends. I feel like I've mentioned that before, didn't I? Yes. Like build numbers automatically incremented. It's pretty cool. So let's do a quick demo. I mean, it's not really a standback demo because I'm not actually doing real time. I don't want things to break. We start with a Xcode project. Basic hello world. We've all seen this before. The first thing we need to do is we need to upload it to GitHub. Boom, let's upload it. Done. Wow, movie magic, eh? Yep. Once it's uploaded into GitHub, basically you go back to your Xcode, open the report navigator, which is basically the button on the right. By default, you see the local build. We've only built when we initially created, so you only see one. But you can switch across to the cloud tab, and you would see the welcome information and that kind of stuff. At this stage, you can press the get started button. You'll get a dialog saying, hey, it's detected. There's your app target, which you can do a build on. It detects a team. You can also switch the team if you want, that kind of stuff. After that, it suggests a basic workflow. So you can see it's going to say any branch change on main using the latest environment. Archive, so it doesn't archive, but it doesn't do anything else after that. So archive is obviously a release build. So essentially what you're saying is do a release build and create an IPA. That's the basic of what they kind of recommend. So if we stick with this, it goes off, hits your repo, it makes sure that it has access. Assuming it doesn't, it will tell you, hey, you got to give us access, right? When you press grant access, you get sent back to App Store Connect. Press a few buttons, it hands you off to GitHub. Press a few buttons, blah, blah, blah. Choose what repos you want to give Xcode App Store Connect access to, or Xcode Cloud access to. You selected one repo. Boom, it will tell you you're now successfully connected. Before we go back to Xcode, we can also verify that if you go into settings, integrations down there, sorry, bad screenshot. And then you can see that Xcode Cloud now has access to this particular repo. It doesn't, which is my way of saying it doesn't use webhooks, because I know I've seen, I think, other CI/CDs actually set up webhooks for you. It doesn't do that. It has its own app integration sort of thing. And then coming back to Xcode, you can see that that button with the permissions now gone, and it says it has access. Moving on. It picks up that there's no App Store Connect entity like set up within App Store Connect for distribution and that kind of stuff, and it basically says, hey, let's create one. One thing I've actually noticed is this seems to fail a lot. So while setting this whole workflow up, I think of the 4 times I tried, 2 of them failed for no apparent reason, and the way I fixed it was manually go and create this app ID. So if it fails here for you, that's what you got to do. You got to go to manually fix it. Assuming it works, which on this try it did work, it tells you it's all set up, you're good to go, and it suggests that you start a new build. I think in this case, obviously, it will say on the main branch, let's do a build. once we kick off the build, you can see it will initially start by queuing it up. Queuing, notice it can be a few seconds. It can also be a few minutes. It really just depends on the load, I suppose. Once I did wait a few minutes, like probably close to 5-10 minutes. I was like worried, did I screw something up? But no, it eventually does get going and stuff. Yeah, so once that's done, it kicks off a build. It does what it needs to do. And then you get your log. And then if you go into the logs, you can see, everything. It displays exactly as it would within a local build. Yeah. If you go into the artifacts, you can see that since this was an archive, you can see all the archives that it generated. It did one for development, for App Store, and ad hoc. And you can also press the download buttons on the right to download it. Sorry. So now if we go in, let's edit the workflow to add some more steps. So it's as simple as selecting the workflow, which was our default one. Going to edit. Within general, you got a whole bunch of settings. You can see your name. Restrict editing. Obviously, that's a permission thing. If you have a larger team, with this, it's just me, obviously, so I don't really care. And then within the environment, you can set up a whole bunch of stuff like Xcode version, macOS version. Like I said earlier, it can be the latest or a beta. You can even do beta versions and that kind of stuff. So if you're even like post dub, if you want to try on a beta version of your app, it's really nice for that. So you don't have to install it locally. Yeah, and obviously this is where you set up your environment variables, and if you set up the general permissions, you can prevent others from editing those and stuff on your team. Moving on to the start conditions, you can set up branch. You can choose what branches this particular workflow runs on. Default, like I said, is on the main branch. You can set up patterns, so you can say if it's a branch begins with release slash. You'll do it for any release and changes to your release, or you can have changes to any particular files. You can say like if I update my info peer list, trigger a build, then you'll use a combination of both those rules, that kind of stuff. Like maybe if you bump the version right of your app, then you can trigger a build. Yep, moving on to the actions. So currently we have the archive. Not much to see here apart from saying that you can enable Testflight. At this stage, let's actually enable internal. So just literally select it, and this is kind of the magic. Just by selecting that, it will take care of signing and everything. You don't have to do anything. It's pretty cool. And then if we add a new action, we can add say testing as that action. So it'll basically run our unit tests. You can configure whether or not it should fail the build or not, and the scheme that you should use for testing. So if you had multiple schemes, you can say that I want to run only these 5 tests for my PRs, or I want to run everything or whatever. It's really up to you. And the cool thing is it's all coming from within Xcode, so it's easy to configure. You don't have multiple sources of truth. Yeah, and then with the run destinations, you can also choose what devices to run it on. So by using the latest, I believe it's currently iPhone 13s that they're primarily using. Yeah, like they don't seem to have the latest, but in general, they've got a wide variety of them. We'll get to that in a second. I'll show you guys. Again, post action, since we did a internal archive, now let's add an internal test flight. At this point, you just need to decide where to send it to. I cheated, I didn't get screenshots. I figured you didn't want to see it. I set up the groups within App Store Connect. So you literally just pick your group, internal testers, and then literally just press done. Press save to say that you're done, right? At this point, we haven't really triggered a build, right? So we can manually start a build by pressing the button in the corner. Select the workflow, which is our default one. Select the branch, pretty easy. Click, click, click. Next thing you know, you got build 2 showing up. It gets queued just like before. And like I said, remember, it runs them in parallel. So you got two actions being run. Both of those are going to clone. You got the test and the archive, right? The archive failed. We'll have a look at that in a bit. But the test passed. Hooray! If you look at the test, it ran on iPhone 13, 13 mini, 13 Pro Max, and the iPhone SE 2nd gen. That's the default. Which, if you think about it, like, I don't know, make your own decision about this, but decide if you do need all of them to run. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, depending on your tests. You can really save a lot of build minutes if you just cut that down to a single device, I would say. Because it ran this test and all of those on this one device. Stuff like flaky tests, it's configured from within your test suite. So if you have a test that's flaky, you can say, "Oh, retry it." Or if it takes too long, you can. I think the default is like 300 seconds or something, so you can increase or decrease that to save your build minutes and stuff. Yeah. So remember, you only have 25 hours, so watch out for the build minutes. The archive. So it failed. If you look at the error, it's just like if you had done archive from within Xcode. It says that you're missing a required icon file. That's easy to fix. Go into the assets. Go to ChatGPT. Get yourself an icon. Hello, cloud. And then go back and you kick off a new build. Simple enough. This time, what did I do there? Oh yeah, we kicked off the build. So you can also see within GitHub, you can view the builds. This is a nice integration. So if you have a PR, you can kind of see what's running and that kind of stuff. Just like any other CI/CD, right? Yeah. Coming back, this time archive succeeded, and we didn't change anything on the testing side, so that passed as well. Hooray! Whoops, sorry, wait. I shouldn't have done that. But it's actually frozen on the post action. They need to fix this. So what's basically happened is I haven't set up the export compliance, right? The signing in and everything. So it's going to hang here for far as I can tell, more than 20-30 minutes. The fix, either you set up your peer list or you go in, you add the compliance. Once you set that up, it will automatically become a red tick, and you'll get an email saying that you can now test your app in Testflight. And using the App Store Connect APIs, you can have a GitHub action using that sample QR code I showed earlier, which will, in about 11 seconds total, download the latest file. Boom, boom, boom. The latest build, sorry. There you go. Done. And then if you go into if you look at the artifacts, you can see it downloaded the IPA. Yeah, so if you want to use that for your own project, you can, that sort of thing. Cool, thank you.